Merry February. This is the state of my life right now. Before we get into the weeds of things, there are 8 hidden kiwis in this Christmas tree behind me. So if you get bored of hearing my voice or the subject matter isn't grabbing you, you can look for the kiwis in the tree. Yeah, so real fast, this video is going to go over what the plans are moving forward with the channel, the literature review that I promised in January, and then a giveaway at the end. I'll put timestamps at the bottom if you want to just skip to those parts. But yeah, the plan right now is, it's February, Black History Month. I'll be following several different units throughout February, and I'm very excited for that. And then we'll probably have one more video on another Austro-Hungarian division, the first division. There's many more divisions. I will get to them all because there is a finite amount, but definitely the 1st and 35th are definitely the longer ones, the bigger units, and the ones that weren't immediately chopped up when the Germans got them. And I'll go over that when I get to those divisions. And then after that, I'll probably be focusing on the Magady area for September and October before the Battle of Tanga. I will probably not jump right into Tanga. Tanga in itself is a very sticky situation. There's so much propaganda around it, and then the post-war period, everything that's written about it, there's so much incorrect information, and I think what I will present will be enlightening, will be different, and you won't find on any other YouTube channel that's just parroting cliches and propaganda newspapers. So yeah, it'll be exciting. And after that, I'll probably go to different front. I might pull some different things. Tanga, I think, is going to take a lot of energy, so I'm avoiding it personally. But more crucially, before we get to Tanga, I'll have everything from August to October 1914, which is so formative for the rest of the campaign of East Africa, that at that point, everything else should be easier, more in depth because there's more people involved, but it'll also be easier. I'll have all the maps already set it out. So I'm excited for that. The maps take a long time. The reason why nothing came up for January real fast, backtracking, is I was getting about 1,000 views per day on, or because YouTube does things in, every week and every 2 days. It doesn't do every daily 24 hours or 12 hours, and you can't change the metric. But every 2 days I was getting about 1,000 views every 48 hours, give or take 100 or maybe 200. But January 1st happened and it was less than 5 views per day. And today is February 1st that I'm recording this, and I've gotten about 10 views. So when YouTubers take January off, I totally get it now, because I don't know what YouTube does to reset the metric, but I didn't change anything, and then bam, it just like plump nosedived out of my control. So January will probably always be light until they change that, or I hear elsewhere that they're changing that. Plus it's also after the holidays. I was exhausted, tired, sick, but enough about me. Yeah, so that's the plan for the channel. If you have suggestions, comments, if you want to know something about World War I, I probably have a reference book for it and can pull up stuff that isn't clickbaity and is actual facts. I'll go into literature review. I've done these into tiers. I haven't named or numbered the tiers, but just going off the first one, I'll probably do it's not like an iceberg. Everyone's into icebergs right now, but I like pyramids, Egypt, Africa. The base thing that probably a lot of you have gotten, I'll probably tier it that way. And at the top, I will go into references and sources that I don't think people know about, but I use all the time, if not with every video. I usually cite all my sources in each video, and those will be down in the description part underneath. And if I need to do some other research or find websites, I usually plug them in there. I also cite the images where I get them all. So if you like an image, it'll probably be on that website. Most of them are Imperial War Museum, so they're super great. I totally recommend everyone using the Imperial War Museum. the facts abound. But yeah, so the literature review, I'll do them in tiers. This bottom tier, I think a lot of people have access to, and probably a lot of people have either paid for it, bought it when it came out, or have found PDFs of it somewhere. And that's actually the Offspray books. I do cite them in my sources, but with this caveat, I think there are 3 types of Offspray readers. I'll put these down to kind of demonstrate. But the first type of Offspray reader is probably the traditional book reader, where they open it to the front page, to the introduction, and they begin reading it, and they read it page by page. A typical Offspray collector will get their book, they'll try to find the middle, and they'll go to the pictures. These are great pictures, they get imagination going, they're not always accurate, but for, what is it, 20 bucks? Yeah, 20 bucks, can't really complain. It's not really a book at that point. And they're the ones that do that. But I like to think of myself as the third type of Offspray reader. And that's the person that goes to the back of the book. And I usually go to, oh my gosh, it's not gonna pop up now. In the back they have the plates, all the information about the pictures in the middle. Here we go. I actually go to the bibliography right here. I might quote a few sentences or words from this, but most of the time I'll actually go to here if I like something and pull out that reference and that source. Pull it up on Google and usually find a PDF of it for free because some of these books are older and these sources are a bit more unique and didn't have an audience, so they're free on the internet. So yeah, I go through those sources typically, and that's how I use an Offspray book. Sometimes if I need a quick reference, like it's close to at hand, I'll pull it out, but I'll always go back and double check it with other sources that I'm going to talk about in a moment. The next ones I'm going to call them convenient sources, and these are a mixture of things. So specifically Vorbrick's autobiography. I'll get into why that is. But the other half of this category is probably older source books. These are in the short post-war era, and typically they rely on propaganda pieces and third-hand information. When Farewell's book came out, it was good because it was the 50s, and I don't think many people were writing about Africa in World War I at all. So it was decent for the time, but there's so little information. There's a lot of colorful syntax, like a Shakespearean thing, but very little information in it that I can't find easily in an Offspray book. They're kind of nice to have as a fact checker, but I have it listed sometimes, but I don't really use this book. Kind of waste of money. Vorbrick's book, this is gonna annoy some people. Similar vein. Vorbrick wrote this in the post-war era. He did not write it on campaign. He didn't write it when he got to Germany. He was a celebrity for a little bit and then wrote it. And that's partly what influences it. Let's take into Vorbrick real fast, get into his psyche. Vorbrick is perhaps the most successful German officer of the war. He's cut off in the early war, at the outbreak of war, basically. And he's able to keep a fighting force together and not be defeated. He is defeated, but he's able to write his own narrative. In that case, he is a successful German officer. And there is a lot you can glean from that into this. But who's his audience? All of that you can almost certainly easily forgive. But what is his audience? It's a defeated German people, basically. He's not writing this to the Americans. He's not writing this to the British. They'll read it because it's so popular in Germany, but he's really writing it for the local Germans that they didn't get to experience what he did. And likely after World War I, they'll probably never get to experience it. And his force did succeed at doing operations here and there versus the Germans on the Western Front. They're living in drudgery. Yeah. So I think between its audience and the writer at the time, he's writing it for that. He's not writing it for historical fact. A lot of times he'll cite casualties as light or heavy, and there's very little. He won't say 63 people, 63 Oscaris and 20 Europeans. He'll usually just use the phrase light or there was a trouble there, which makes for great reading, but it's not a good reference piece. I do quote him from time to time, but I think that's allowable in history to quote the leader of the armed forces there. If Kitchener had survived the war, I'd probably put his book in with this one, where it comes out of the post-war era, but there's better books out there. Yeah, so if you don't like that, go in the comments, tell me that you don't like that I said about Vorbrick, but that's how I feel. A lot of times too, he writes things, his most famous quote about Maasai person telling him that we don't care who our masters are. They kind of did. They cared about who protected their cattle, and who wasn't pilfering from them. Because the minute the Germans start pilfering from them, they go to the British and they're like, can you stop the Germans? I have a video about that. I might try to remember to link that down here. My next category of books, next tier, what are we on? Tier 1, 2, 3, these are unit histories, but they're written in the third-hand account. So I'll get into that in a second. These are great books. These are less than 20 bucks. They're cheaper than an Offspray book. They're less than 200 pages each, and you can read them in an evening. I read MZLE in like 3 hours, and it was amazing. Same thing. The only reason why I didn't do that for this is because MZLE is a dude, and this is a whole unit, and I've been using it. I've been trying to go. I've had to stop myself from just reading it in one go. Both are well written. Both of them use facts, but they're both also written in the third hand. MZLE is a German Ascari. Before that, he's actually a German native under Arab imperialism in East Africa, which is completely fascinating, and I haven't heard about a whole lot. Then he endures German imperialism, and after the First World War, he goes to British imperialism, and then he's telling his story to a bunch of Safari people during the independence of his country, which is completely fascinating to go from, pre-1900 to the 1960s with one guy, and he gets to experience that. He opens up, he's enslaving other Africans at age 9, and then when he's in his 60s, he's just showing white Europeans and, hey, this is where these rhinos might be. And like, hey, that's where that tribe used to be. It's entirely fascinating. I encourage anyone to read this book. It's great. Yeah, it's just awesome. Same thing with this book, the East African Mounted Rifles. They're an awesome unit. How they were formed, what they did. The book is well written by C.J. Wilson. Again, it's less than 200 pages, and you get a real sense for what the men went through. It's written in the third hand, so when it doesn't do a good job of going by date, or it gives specific casualty numbers, but not specific dates, which is sometimes confusing. So that's the reason I didn't put it at a higher tier. And I would call those like fun third-hand accounts. They're great. Definitely get both of those books. If you just need something quick to read, they're awesome. So the next tier I'm going to put as great secondary sources, and that is the unit histories. I can't have them all here, but this is the King's African Rifles one. I've got one on all of the random African units, British African units. I'm able to find ones about the South African units on the interwebs, and then I've got a German translating document for the German units. All of those are great to have, great sources, whatnot. The problem with those sources is they're very microscopic. They don't give you a big picture. So sometimes they blame the officers for certain things that are just out of their control. They couldn't have predicted that. Officers trained for decades in England or in India, and there's vast open fields, and they get shipped, deployed to Africa, and there's bushes twice as tall as they are. And they're like, well, how am I supposed to command now? It's kind of a pointless operation. And they blame them the higher ups, and it's kind of unfair. But I go through that in my videos. Actually, Mzima Springs is a good version of that, where I used a lot of different unit sources. I went from the Indian units and the King's African Rifles book there, put them together, and I used this book as well, the official British military document that they created in the immediate post-war era. This one's great. The only issue I have with it is it stops in 1916. It stops when the German colony doesn't completely fall, but all the major population centers are under British control by 1916, and the colonies kind of ceases to operate as a colony at that point. Verbeck had been very successful to that point, but in 1916, there was just too much, and he couldn't do anything about it. There was too much material being thrown at him. No one could have done better than he could have. And so this is how the British got to that point. It goes by dates, it goes by areas, it goes by official unit histories and reports given to the War Department. And the dude compiled it into this volume set. And he's very fair with both sides. He goes like, this is what the British did well, this is what the Germans did well. And he doesn't take anyone's side, which I think is very hard for him to do. It's a great book, and it's very clear cut, concise. It's also got, what was that? It's got 50 pages of maps in it. Things that happened for one engagement for one afternoon. There's a map for it. It also goes on to when units were around, when units weren't around, when they were disbanded, when they were folded into one another. It's a great source. It has, what do you call that? Total strength, unit strength. Super handy to have, because a unit might get deployed to Africa with, let's say, 100 dudes, but by the time it sees action, it's got 25. So that's helpful to have. Yeah, and then it breaks down by region in the header, and it goes by date on here. It's super great. And if there's something weird that wasn't in the official unit report but affected things, it'll have a little blurb at the bottom. Perfect source book. I encourage everyone to get this book. I call it my red Bible because I'm usually carrying it everywhere in my my bag. When I'm writing a script, like it's not uncommon for me to go, what date am I on? This date. And like copy paste from here onto the computer screen and then put other sources, and in that kind of jumble, I'll end up rewriting basically the original document. But yeah, that's why I cite this book all the time. This is my premium tier of literature I use. And I don't think people know about these sources. Everyone knows about Vorberg's book, but these books I think are, well, no, I know for a fact they are more well researched, cited, and they go into a bigger picture. And that is Guerrillas of Tsavo, Guerrillas of Savo. Thank you for correcting my pronunciation, everyone. I'll probably mess up things all the time. This book is a required thing if you are into the campaign. I'll go on to Edward Pace's book, which is even better, but this only focuses on East Africa, which I enjoy. And what's his name? James Wilson. He does an amazing job of going through, I don't know if I can get any focus, but it's date by date. Super helpful when writing. He'll tell you what happened on that date all throughout the front. If any combat happened, it's all on that date. He's got little blurbs about things that are fascinating but aren't part of East Africa. But the thing I really like is, let me find it real fast. I should have marked these ahead. Author's collection. He's actually gone to some of the places. So he'll talk about it here, and then he'll go visit it in modern day, grab a photo because they didn't do it during the war, and put it in. It's an incredible book. He did an amazing job. I think his primary thing is tourism in Kenya, and he's got a Facebook page. It's amazing. Go like it, go research it. And if you don't like Facebook, that's a great source to go look at and kind of just soak in the information. Yeah, this book is, I'm not going to encourage everyone to get it because not everyone needs this. Some people are going to be fine with an Offspray book. It's just the way the world is. But this book is a required book purchase. I know he's redone it a few times. He's added information and corrected typos here and there. It's got periods in random spots sometimes, but who cares when it's such great information? So I assume his additions after that have just added more and corrected punctuation here and there. Amazing book. It's also great, like, for coffee table decoration. Be like, oh look, I'm so smart. I'm reading Gorillas of Salvo. Yeah. But probably the premier tier, I'm gonna still lump it in with James Wilson's book, but Edward Pace's World War I, The African Front is probably the best written book. I don't like it to read on my free time, but it is probably the best researched book, published book that you can buy on the internet. The dude lived there for decades. He has maps, but he's got over 40 pages of citations and a bibliography. So it's well researched. And if something happened in Africa from 1914 to 1918, it's in this book. I've yet to find something he might not go through the whole story of it, but he'll talk about how it impacts the larger campaign overall, even if it's mentioned one time. Everything is in here. He'll sometimes go back in time, but that's because something's going on. Famously, when it's the Lake Tanganyika speedboats that they used to defeat the British, or the British speedboats that defeated the German large steamers. He goes back in time and talks about how it happened at the British staff office and how that became a thing. Great book, cannot recommend high enough. This is probably even more required. This copy is from, I'm gonna date myself here a little bit. 2012. I'm still reading it. It is hard to read, but that's because literally every sentence is full of facts, information, and there's no story element to it. It's literally facts. Yeah, he goes over the Portuguese. He talks about German Southwest Africa. Talks about German Cameroon. Everything that's basically south of the Sahara, he talks about in here. Cannot recommend high enough, give any more praise to. It's an amazing book. If you want to write a research paper or document, this is the book to get. I always cite it with everything I do. And whenever I'm doing a video, I usually will start here and then work my way down with other sources. I'll go take my Bible and then if almost always these two sources are in coherence with one another, and they correct my other. I lost the third half of the footage I shot originally, so it's now daytime, raining outside, so if the audio quality is weird, apologies. But yes, giveaway time. I will be giving away a 1st Auckland Battalion patch. It's the patch they would wear in the late war to identify troops from the Auckland district that were in the New Zealand Expeditionary Force in France in 1918. To enter to win, you simply need to publicly subscribe. If you've already done that, your name is already on there. Great job. For people that don't want to do that for any reason, I don't need to hear about it. Great. Simply go to the page's Facebook or Twitter, and there post a picture of your favorite World War I book with hashtag Safari Kiwi. Did I get that on? Yeah. And that's just to cut down on the spam bots. That way people just aren't entering randomly, or computers aren't just AI, whatever. All to say, I will be taking entries all throughout February. The last day of February, I will plug all those names, entries into a random generator. I will then hit spin or go, and it'll give me a name. I will then contact that person and mail them their patch. And hopefully they give a little thank you. So yeah, I hope this video has been informative of where the channel is going to go. I hope that the literature analysis was enlightening. If you have further questions, ask below. I will address all of them. And if it keeps coming up, I might even do a video to address them. Yeah, that way it's just easier. And I hope you're excited for the giveaway. I'm excited to give away a replica piece of New Zealand history, World War I history. And yeah, that's all I have for today. Cheers, folks.